Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Chris with us. Chris, do you just want to quickly introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Chris Overend. I'm a racing driver with Team Brit. I started racing with them about 3 years ago now. And I've competed in the British Endurance Championship this year. I used to be a former wheelchair tennis player. I was born with developmental dysplasia of the hips, and I've had lots and lots of surgeries for the last, God knows, my whole life basically. And then I've been plagued with disability. I say plagued; it's actually been more of a blessing, funny enough. But we'll get to that. For really the last 15 years of my life, and I'm currently a teacher at Solent University, where I teach photography.
That is awesome. God, you've done some really cool stuff, and I'm like, whenever I'm telling my story, I'm like, oh, that's mine's not that interesting. Tell us a bit more. So, like, for anyone that doesn't know you, like, to give people like a snapshot of you. Tell us your journey, sort of this far, how it all came about, how you got into racing. What's the sort of time frame you've gone through?
So for me, the time frame for sports or for racing, just in general.
Just in general, I mean, like your journey through sort of life. As that sounds like a really big question, but in terms of your journey, just through, like you said there, like you've played wheelchair tennis, you've then gone on to race driving. So what was the timescales of that? Like, what was growing up like, and then all of a sudden you're like race driver?
Yeah, no. I mean, racing driving is something I dreamt of when I was a kid. So I never in a million years dreamt that I'd actually had the chance to do it.
Mm.
So yeah, born with developmental dysplasia of the hips, fairly
Yep.
standard thing that kids have. I was in a Pavlok cradle, which is like a cast around my pelvis when I was a baby for about a year, which
Yep.
basically when I was born, my hips weren't in the sockets. So they kind of forced them into the sockets and then held me there for like a year or something until it started to sort of mend. And it's an unusual thing for it to come back as an adult. And I discovered that it had come back as an adult when I was in my early 20s. So I had a relatively normal childhood growing up, other than I kept breaking bones and falling over a lot, and everyone's saying that I'm clumsy. But actually, it was kind of comforting to find out in my mid-20s that it wasn't that I was clumsy; it's there was something mechanical wrong with me.
Yep.
And yeah, I did loads of sports, Charlie. I was sports mad. I was never good at running. I was never good at anything that involved my legs, but I was always good at throwing things. I was good at hitting things. So a lot of my sports were racket-based sports. Um, yeah, sorry, you going to ask something?
No, I was just gonna say it's interesting. Like whenever I speak to people with, particularly like physical disabilities, there's always an element of like we all get really into sports. Because I was the same. Like when I grew up, so small bit of context about me. I've got cerebral palsy. Had it since I was like 4 weeks old. So I don't know any different. I've always been a wheelchair user. Always had additional needs, and I sort of started my journey of sport of right. I started with, I think it was football was my first one. Then I did some horse riding as well. Then I did wheelchair basketball. Then I did wheelchair football. Then I did wheelchair rugby. I tried absolutely everything, and then I ended up actually getting to quite a high level in swimming. So swimming was where it sort of clicked after 2012. I think a lot of people with disabilities got into it, but yeah, it's always interesting. Like sport is such a great thing when it comes to physical disabilities. It's like I was talking on another podcast the other day saying that like almost find a way of making the physiotherapy that you're always made to do fun, and that sport is like that for I think a lot of people.
Couldn't agree with you more. Like, I hated exercising, but I loved doing sports because it kind of fed my competitive edge. But it was definitely a good way to get fit or stay fit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a lot of sports. I always had problems with my back. Always had a bad back, and didn't really think much of it. And I think it was bear in mind, I used to ski, Charlie. So I had great times. I had
Yep.
really good ability to turn left on the ski slopes, but I had really bad problems with turning right. And it wasn't until I found out when I had all the x-rays and stuff done that I found out that my left femur was 2 inches shorter than my right femur. So
Oh
that's why I
wow.
was struggling on the slopes, because a left turn would be really easy because my left leg would be higher, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Whereas when I went to do the right turn, it always felt like I was about to literally fall off the mountain because I was having to put my left leg
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
lower down. And yeah, that I did a skiing holiday, hurt my back, came back, had a load of chiropractors, and it was from that back injury, I suppose, that I learned about the severity of my hips. And the surgeon showed me an X-ray, and he said, this is what's happened. Your left hip hasn't developed properly,
Yeah.
and you need to make some major life changes. He said to me right away, like, no more running, no more jumping, no more walking fast, no more going up ladders. You've just got to be super careful for the rest of your life. And I kind of did, but I kind of ignored him. And at the time, I was working up in London as an assistant photographer. So I
Yeah.
was doing quite a physical job, Charlie. I was setting up studios, moving heavy stuff around.
Yeah.
Um, the thing was, I went to go to work one morning and my left hip dislocated. And I've got very shallow hip sockets. So for like a normal person having a hip dislocation, that's a traumatic thing. That's something that you have to go to hospital to have, relocated. And for me, I kind of stood in the street and panicked for a little bit because I could feel my hip kind of sticking out from
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
bum. And I sort of managed to relocate it and it kind of popped back in. But it freaked me out because I was only, I was 23, 24 at the time. So we got in touch with the doctors, and the surgeon said, was hoping that wasn't going to happen for a while. And then they brought me in for the big op, basically. And I had pretty major surgery, Charlie, to try and force my hip back into the socket. So they severed my femur.
Wow.
I had titanium rods in my leg, screws, bolts, the lot. I looked like I had a car crash, basically. And unfortunately, it didn't work, Charlie. So
Wow.
it left me bedbound for about 2 years. And I had the surgery done 3 times. I had a fall in that time. I tore my
Jeez.
ACL, and I lost all use of my left leg. So when I eventually the surgery worked and the bones started to knit together, I had a completely limp left leg. So I had to, lift it to move it, and I was wholly
Yeah.
dependent on moving around on crutches and a wheelchair, just to survive, really. And
That's
that was that
insane.
was that was that was a really interesting time in my life. I say it was interesting; it was a really hard time in my life.
Yeah.
Because I went from being quite an active person to suddenly being completely sedentary for a very long time.
I always say I'm grateful that like I don't know any different. So like for me, everyone goes like, "What's it like to be in a wheelchair?" And I'm like, "What's it like to walk?" Like I don't have any reference point. Where someone like yourself who has that almost you start out as quote unquote able-bodied and then deteriorate from there, and then you have to adjust your life completely. That mentally is such a challenge. Have you had many challenges? I'm imagining you've had a lot of challenges with your mental health from the
Yeah,
journey that you just
massively.
explained.
Yeah, massively, Charlie. Like, I was on high dose like buprenorphine, which is a synthetic morphine. So I was on those patches for years and years and years to deal with the chronic pain that I had. And yeah, I definitely had some massive mental health battles. Like, it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with the new me and what I was going to do in my life, basically.
Yeah.
And I think the really big turning point for me was I I still had this photography in my head. I was still a photographer, and I
Yeah.
just thought, well, photography is just using your brain. And I got a job interview at a car magazine, and it was such a shock to me because I'd never done car photography before. I was just into cars, and I think I got the interview on the strength of my photography background. And I went there, and I remember taking some Oromorph before I went in for the job interview, and
Mm.
I could put no weight on my left leg at all. Like, it was still a broken femur, and it was still lame. And I remember taking some morphine, leaving one of my crutches in the wheelchair in the car, and basically doing my best to kind of mask what was wrong with me. And
Ooh.
I look back at that and I'm really ashamed that I did do that, because I should have just been me. I should have just gone in there and then gone, this is who I am. This is how I live now.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to pretend to be something I'm not. And I didn't get the job, but it was such a good thing to happen, because 6 months later, there was a job that came up at the university to teach photography. And I did go there fully open about my condition, fully open about the fact that I'm probably going to use a wheelchair at certain points. And I got the job, and
Yeah.
that changed my life for the better. It really did. And then I've been at the university for 14 years now. It's been my 14th anniversary in November. And, they're really accommodating. I've had operations and time off since I've been there. And, they've made adaptations for, the rooms I can always get into, the studios I can get into, wheelchair fits under the desk. There's nothing I can't do. I probably use my wheelchair not as much as I should, because I do use a walking stick a lot of the time. But it's nice that I can have that kind of support.
Yeah.
But I've gone a long way around to answering your question.
No, honestly, I like getting the background because it paints the picture for me. One question I did want to ask, as working in universities and teaching, how do your students react to it? Like, react to their teacher being someone with a disability or someone in a wheelchair occasionally?
Do you know what? Like, it's been really interesting, because I think when I first started working at the university, there was the odd look if I came in my wheelchair someday. But I think in the last 4 years, particularly the last 4 or 5 years, it's totally normal. Like, I come in and it's just Chris. It's not, oh, Chris is using a wheelchair today. It's just Chris. And I think the current generation of students are a lot more accepting of people that might be different from them. And it's actually really lovely, mate. It's really, really nice.
I think the nice thing there as well is, like, a lot of the time when I speak to friends that are quote unquote ambulatory wheelchair users, they get a lot more shit than, say, someone like me, who the wheelchair is just a permanent fixture. It's always there. And it's almost like, oh, but why can you do this one day and not this the next? When actually just conditions are like that. They fluctuate day by day. So it's really nice to hear that, like, people haven't essentially gone to you like, oh, are you faking it? It raises all those questions that always feel a bit ridiculous, because you sit there going, why would someone fake having a disability?
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get the odd funny look from people in the university that don't know me. I've had a few unpleasant conversations with other staff members about it, which hasn't been so nice. And it frustrates me that I feel like I need to give them my whole life story to tell them, look, I'm really fucking struggling today. I'm using my wheelchair. What business is it of yours?
Yeah.
But yeah, generally the students, well, I say generally, all the students totally fine with it. It's really nice.
I suppose it's also maybe more of a modern outlook for younger people. I think I've had it before. Like, the older generation is always either they're like, oh, what are you doing now? Or the whole like, oh, poor you. Those are the two extremes you get. And it's so strange. But it's nice to hear, particularly in like a education setting, because on this podcast, like, we brought up a couple of times, like, going through the education system, it's a bit of a mismatch of people's experiences. Like I've said, when I was in primary, I had a great experience because kids don't really care. Like, little kids, they're like, yeah, he's in a wheelchair, cool, great, move on. Whereas secondary school, you start getting them with the teasing and everything else. And actually, interestingly, when it comes to uni, one of the reasons I didn't choose to go to uni was because I was like, there's so many accessibility considerations that I just don't know how to deal with. Like, I always, being quite high up in swimming, I wanted to go to Bath Uni or wanted to go to Swansea. I live in, like, London. Those are two very far places away from my family. To then suddenly go, do you know what? Yeah, I'm going to live there. It was like, I don't even know how I'd make that work.
We got
So,
a lot of students with cerebral palsy at the university, Charlie.
oh really?
One of our students just finished her PhD, and she's from South Africa, so she's been
Wow.
living on her own with very little family support for the last 7 years. You know, all credit to her. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but she fucking does it. You know, she's a trooper.
I think as well. That's one credit I credit myself now is that I think if you ask me now, I would have just figured out a way around it. But at that time, I was a lot more reluctant to ask for help. Like the prospect of someone helping me that wasn't like a family member or a really close friend was like a big no. Like in my head, that was not something that we do. But then now I'm very much like, if I need help, I'll just ask for it. Because at the end of the day, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
I think it was, oh God, going back a bit, I suppose it was like 2016. And I was watching wheelchair tennis at Wimbledon with a mate of mine. And I hadn't played tennis for like a long time, Charlie. And I really missed it. It was of all the sports, skiing and tennis were the two things that I missed the most. And I kind of just looked at it and I thought, I wonder if I could do this. And then I started to research it and I was like, well, Christ, well, you need a tennis wheelchair. I haven't got a tennis wheelchair. Yeah. It's not like you could just go and get one because they're a lot of money. So I started doing a bit of homework on it and I found the Tennis Foundation, which is a charity that helps get people into wheelchair tennis. And they basically organised for me to go to an event in Portsmouth and just go and have a hit with a professional wheelchair tennis player who, funny enough, is actually one of my teammates at Team Brit now, a guy called Steve Crompton. Yeah, it's really,
oh, wow.
That's another story to come back to. But he introduced me to wheelchair tennis. I introduced him to racing.
Wow.
And I took to it like a duck to water. Like, hitting the ball from a lower point of view, no problem whatsoever. I still had all the ground strokes. The only problem was Steve would hit the ball to me and the ball would just come flying past me because I'm like, oh yeah, I need to move.
yeah. That's always the challenge. Whenever I think about wheelchair tennis, I'm like, you got to be so like on the ball because you've almost got to predict where the ball's going to land.
100%. You're basically hitting the ball, doing an immediate turnaround, and you're wheeling backwards, like looking over your shoulder to basically look at someone's wrist angle or look at their shoulder angle, because then you get some kind of an idea of where they're going to hit the shot and also where their head's pointing. And you've got to make that split-second decision.
Yeah. I'd almost argue that that's harder than able-bodied tennis.
Oh, mate, wheelchair tennis is tough. It's a tough sport.
Yeah.
And, like, I had a great experience with wheelchair tennis. The coach that was there was from Team GB. They stuck me on their development squad for a year, which I felt completely like an imposter in there because all the other people that in that squad all had, regional shirts from, tournaments they've played in and representing their counties. Yeah. And then there's just me wearing a Nike shirt and a borrowed wheelchair. And it was hard. I think I waited like 4 months for my tennis wheelchair to arrive. That made a huge difference when I got that. And then, I did like a year of losing in every single tournament I played in, and coming home like every weekend, like with holes in my fingers and my palm from all the metal rubbing away. And that first year was brilliant because I got to meet the tennis community. I met a lot of other people with disabilities, which is great. And I got to get back into the social side of tennis, which, was always the thing that I loved the most. That and, really whacking a great shot across that's fine than that. The second year, started to get better basically. And I had a lot more coaching, did a lot more coaching myself, worked with the junior player as well to help them get into it. And came into the second year like a much better player and actually managed to win quite a few doubles tournaments. So got quite a few medals on the thing back there.
Yeah.
And at the end of that year, we won the national title at Shrewsbury, which was like that was so
Yeah.
nice to go home to mum and dad and go, boom, there's an actual trophy. Because my parents were both national racquetball champions, and
Oh
I'd,
wow.
I'd never won anything growing up, Charlie. Like I had, I maybe won like, third place medals or something in like a athletic sports day, throwing a javelin or throwing something like that. But
Yep.
I never did well. So it's nice to be able to go back and give that to him. And then that season finished, did a load of training over the winter, got to really peak fitness. Went into the first tournament, had a great tournament.
Yep.
A week later, we were in COVID.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
And then like every single tournament got cancelled. Our court access was removed. That was it. We basically had to stop for, I think it was a year before I actually went on court again. And the junior player that I'd worked with had made it into Team GB, and he was given special dispensation to train. So I was allowed to go out with him onto an outdoor court when everyone else wasn't allowed to do stuff and play with him. And I'll tell you what, it's amazing how quickly your fitness goes. When you don't do something for like a year, I was beyond depressed how out of shape I was, how just I struggled with everything. And
that was the biggest challenge of COVID, I think, was anyone that's into sport or keeping fit. It was like, there's only so many home workouts you can do. There's only so much entertainment you can get out of a home workout. Yeah. I always used to say, you said about the being out of shape. I mean, it's not to the extent or the length, but I always used to hate coming back to training after the Christmas break, getting back in the pool and basically being told to just drill down. Oh, the first 2 weeks after Christmas, after all the turkey sandwiches, you were like, I can't do this.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it felt like. I mean, I'm nowhere near in the shape that I want to be. And funny enough, I want to go back to doing some more wheelchair tennis next year. So I need to get a new tennis wheelchair because I've got quite a heavy aluminium one. And my day chair is a beautiful RGK titanium chair. And I've been eyeing up all of my mates' titanium wheelchairs, and I've had a go in there, and I'm like, it's like a quarter of the weight of the aluminium.
Yeah, I've got the RGK sub 4. That's
what I've got. That's what I've got.
Yeah, but in comparison to my previous one, which was what was it? It was a Sunrise Medical Argon 2, which weighed 9 kilos. So you've essentially slashed it in half.
Yeah,
it is a dream to push. But say that, and they've got the Viper now, which is like 2.8, I think.
Wow.
Yeah,
no. The sub 4 was expensive enough, as you probably realise.
Yeah.
I'd love to get an RGK Grand Slam. Go back to doing some wheelchair tennis next year. Get fit again. That's really what I want to do. But yeah, long story short, COVID happened. I got really bored at home, and I wanted to go sim racing basically. And I can use my leg, mate, but I can't push very hard. And I was doing the gas fine, but I couldn't brake. Literally couldn't stop the car. And I wanted to get hand controls for sim racing. And
this is what I wanted to look into because I thought, that'd be such a cool idea. Yeah, that's wicked. I need to try this.
I can show you all of this, okay? But basically, I found a picture of the sim racing wheel I had with hand controls on it, and that was Team Brit. So I contacted Team Brit and said, you've got hand controls for sim racing. Do you think you can adapt my wheel? And they were like, yeah. Why don't you get you down once we're allowed out again? We'll have a look at your wheel and see what we can do for you. And really, I went down there for an afternoon. I had to go on the hand controls on their sim race, on their sim thing that they've got. He looked at my wheel. This was the lead engineer, Al. Basically told me that my wheel was no good and I needed to spend quite a lot more money to get it up to spec. And, I kind of came away from that a bit disheartened because I was like, I've already spent so much money on this. And, the sim got pushed to the corner, and I didn't really use it for about 6 months after that. But then fast forward to the following summer, because I don't know if you remember, but we went into another lockdown. We had
Yes, I
lockdown
do.
part two,
Yep.
which was the worst one of all because that was over winter. And when we came out in March, email in my inbox from Team Brit, do I fancy coming and having a go on Academy Day, which was basically driving a real race car with hand controls. And I was like, sign me up. I definitely want to try this. And it kind of just snowballed from there, Charlie. I went from having a quick go in a race car to then being invited to come and have a go in one of their actual race cars down at the Top Gear track.
That's amazing.
And then, you know, that evening got an email saying, do you want to be a rookie with us? You know, we'll help you get your race license and we'd like to put you out in a race in October. And that was like, I don't know, that was like May time, June time.
Wow.
So I was
Yeah.
racing. And that's how it happened.
That's insane. I mean, it's something that I've always wanted to like explore more because there's not many options when it comes to not necessarily race days, like racing as an actual racer, but like when it comes to like, you know, everyone gets like the virgin experiences of go drive a Lamborghini, do that. I'm like, it'd be so cool just to be able to go, right, this is what I need to be able to do it. Can you put it on? How cool would that be? But it doesn't exist. It's so hard as a disabled driver to get like those opportunities to go, I just want to tear around a track and see what it's like. Instead of driving on the A2 going, I'm still stuck in traffic.
Yeah. Well, it exists. It does exist. I mean, Team Brit will start to probably do their Academy Days again next year. So if you or anyone that's listening to this that doesn't think that they could actually tear on a track, you know, get in touch with them. The places are in ultra high demand, so it's something that you kind of need to look out for. And once they release all the dates for it, is, you know, get in there quickly. And they're really good days. Like, you've got a race instructor with you, and you know the only thing is you're at the mercy of the weather, and you're at the mercy of the track itself, because you're out there on a track day with other drivers, and sometimes there are red flags, sometimes there are big disruptions to the day, and there's not much can be done about that. But yeah, go and do it. It's life-changingly fun. It's so fun.
Definitely. So I'm going to look into.
Well, the sim wheel that I've got here is a good representation of the hand controls that we drive our cars with. So you see behind the steering wheel, I've got two big levers. So in the race car, this lever is my throttle and this lever is my brake. Now, this is a very simplified version of it because the race car has got a much more complicated arrangement that's a lot more accurate and a lot more robust. Whereas this is just purely for sim racing. And then on the real car, you've got toggle switches here and here that you push up for up change and you push down for down change. So the whole car is operated with your fingertips, your thumbs.
That's amazing. Like, I always wondered why that wasn't a thing when it comes to general driving, because those who use hand controls, it's always like, here's your push-pull levers.
Well, I can answer that question, actually, Charlie, because we've had a lot of people come and talk to us and go, you know, I really like your system. I'd like to put it into a road car. And it's really simple. You know, if you've got to turn the road car wheel
all the way around,
you suddenly have like an inability to be able to push the throttle. So that is unfortunately why road cars have a push-pull. And you've got your steering ball. It's so that you can, you know, turn the wheel quickly to maneuver out of a space and get around a corner. But
I suppose, that does make sense. Yeah, that does make now you say it makes a lot of sense.
I don't see why you couldn't have both. You know, that would be my dream scenario. But as a member of the public, a responsible driver on the roads, I do have a race license, and police don't take lightly to someone with a race license driving in a spirited manner on the road. And to be perfectly honest with you, I get all my kicks on the track. I'm actually a very sedate driver on the roads compared to, you know, the youngster that I was in my 20s. And if I had that on my road car, I would lose my license. And if you lose your road license, you lose your race license. So for me, it's not worth considering that. But
So you legally you can't have something of that system in your road car.
no, you could legally have it, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get it sorted. Because when I looked at putting this into my road car, when I first met the team, we would have to have taken the airbag out. And if you take the airbag out, you then need a 4-point harness, which then means you need a half cage put into your car. And it was a lot of modifications to make it actually work. And I didn't see the benefit of doing it. And I was just kind of like, yeah, I get your point about me needing to keep my race, my license. So I don't know. We can talk about this off camera if you want, Charlie, because I can put you in touch with the team. But I've had several people say to me, I'd quite like this to be able to have for my car so that I can go do track days. And I don't see why that can't be adapted for a road car to be able to put into a track day car. That you could then drive to the track with your push pull, take your steering ball off, get strapped in to go onto the track, and then switch to the handlebars like that. I don't see why that couldn't work.
Maybe there's a business case there.
Here, I mean, I don't know the technology, so that's Team Brit that owns the technology on that. So that would be up to you to get in touch with them, Charlie, and go. So
fair enough.
I was talking to Chris, and he told me about this amazing system, and any chance you can put it in my car? And then you can have the discussion with them as to whether you go through it or not.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think it's just interesting that that sort of adaptation exists in the racing context, but there's not like a further adapted version that suits road driving.
Well, I mean, there kind of is. I mean, one of my mates, Steve, he's got a ring that goes around the steering wheel.
Yeah, I've seen the ring
that you push forward for gas. And I've seen other race cars with a ring behind the wheel. So it's all around the steering wheel and you pull that towards you for gas. But all of them have still got a push brake. So you've still got that, that like the Jeff Gosling hand control, you still push to actually push the actual brake. I think the difference with the system that we've got in our race cars is it's a hydraulic system. So it's actuated. So when you pull that brake towards you, you've actually got something that's attached to the braking system in the car that does the push for you.
Right. Yeah.
So, you're pulling the brake pedal back an inch and that's applying like 150 bar of pressure onto the brake pedal, which I think in a road car, I don't think you necessarily want the brake to suddenly go like that.
Not really.
But you can be progressive with it. So it's not like it's a hard stop.
That's really interesting. But coming back to sort of more you in general, so you started as a rookie. You got put in your first race. What was the biggest learning curve when you started?
Gears, 100% gears. The braking and the throttle was really intuitive. Because essentially you're putting in an action and you get a reaction. So you're touching the throttle, you can feel it kind of judder in the car, and you touch the brake and you can feel it slowing with you. But the gears I couldn't get my head around the gears when I first started driving, because what I was trying to do, Charlie, was I was trying to do everything with my dominant hand. So I'm right-handed. So I was trying to up change and down change with my right hand. And I was going into corners, braking, and then I was forgetting which button I wanted to press to go down a gear. So I kept up changing when I meant down change, and and every now and then I'd down change when I meant to up change. So that was definitely the hardest thing for me, was just learning that new way of thinking.
It's the level of, whenever I think of it, I'm like, the level of concentration you got to have going around a track at whatever speed you're traveling at. Yeah, I don't know.
You've got to be on your toes, but I think it focuses your mind. I go into, it's not like a trance, but you do forget about a lot of things. I mean, the nicest thing for me whenever I'm strapped into a race car is I'm immobile. My legs are just there. I've got a seat hugging me all around, and I forget about absolutely everything. All I think about is, where's my braking zone? Where's my turning in point? Where are the other cars when I look in my mirrors? And I don't think about, what's going on with my body anymore. And, you talk to the other drivers in the team that I'm with, they'll all tell you the same thing. You're out
Yeah,
there racing against able-bodied people, and it's very liberating.
I suppose it's really nice as well because, particularly with something like racing, it's an even playing field. Like as soon as you've got the reasonable adaptations that you need, it's even Stevens. It's just who is the better driver. Whereas
Yeah,
something like me being ex Paralympic, if you race in a mainstream race, you're essentially not part of the race because you're just racing against your time versus the records of your category, and
yeah.
that then means that like it's quite soul destroying. You jump in the pool and like everyone just disappears, and you're sat there like, right, I'm just gonna do my best. So that's like really nice in the racing context of like it's just even Stevens and you're all part of the competition. Whereas
Yeah.
in the swimming context, it's a very different kettle of fish. I mean,
No, I know what you mean. That's 100% one of the things that I've loved about the racing is, we've got guys in our team that are paraplegic. We've got guys with limbs missing. We've got guys with brachial plexus injuries where they're paralyzed on one side of their body. And like you said, we're all racing against able-bodied drivers, and
yeah,
you get in the car, the other person you're racing against has no idea. You're just another driver.
yeah. That is one thing, but that's even in a day-to-day life. That is one thing I enjoy when it comes to the way I drive. It's like if you drive past me, you don't know any different. I mean, I've been verbally abused enough times driving into disabled base. But yeah, it's how often do you compete?
So the last race I did was in August. That was in a 6-hour endurance race. I've not done as much races this year as I've wanted to, and that's for various reasons. But so I did a round in March. I did a round in the end of April/May, and then I did a round in. Oh no, did I? Yeah, so I did. I did Silverstone, Brands Hatch, and then Alton Park. So I did 3 races at the start of the year.
Brands Hatch is around the corner from me.
Brands Hatch, the wicked circuit. Last year I did a lot more races. So last year I did 6 rounds, which were 12 races, and each weekend was 2 races basically. So we had a race at lunchtime and then a race at the end of the day. And the races at the end of the day were interesting because, like, the ones that were in wintertime almost went into darkness, which was quite cool.
Oh yeah, that is quite cool. Have you ever crashed?
Touch wood, no. I've had some mechanical failures where I've had to take evasive action to stop the car from crashing. I've spun out once at the Craner Curves at Donington, and that's really the only time that I've really lost control of a vehicle, and that was in the Aston Martin Vantage that we had, and I was going through the Craners and I looked in my mirror and I could see Peter Ursich behind me. He was in a Porsche Carrera GT3 and he was bearing down on me quick. And I was like, oh, when am I going to let him through? And then as I looked back at the track, I was like, you should have lifted off the throttle by now, Chris, and turned in. You've done neither of those things. And I turned in. And when I spoke to Peter about it afterwards, Peter was like, I knew you were going to spin. I could see where you were on the track that you were going to spin. And sure enough, the car I tried to hold it and the car just did this huge pirouette and I ended up in the middle of the track. That was quite scary. I had a mechanical failure at Alton Park. I managed to keep the car out of the barriers. I think I just nicked one of the barriers with the rear arch, but
Wow.
No, touch wood, I've not had any big whacks. No accidents.
Did it rattle you at all?
The brake failure at Donington Park did rattle me a little bit because the next time I got in the car was for qualifying for the race. So I went from having driven the car, fully functioning, and then had a brake failure and ended up sliding into the gravel at Old Hairpin at about 100 miles an hour. And the crew had to dig out about, 10, 15 kilos of gravel out the car. And then they got to the bottom of the brake. And I think I had a fairly I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a little bit shook up by it when I went to go to sleep that night because obviously it was the first time I've raced that car, and it was quite a long endurance race, so I knew I was going to do an hour-long stint in the car. But I made sure that I went and saw the repair, and ensured that it was done to a high standard, which it was. I got in the car the following morning and I went out and did my out lap, and the brakes felt really strong. And I don't know, like as soon as the lights went out and the race started, I didn't even think about it. It literally didn't even cross my mind that anything would go wrong. And I had a fantastic race. It was absolutely awesome. I love that car. It was a 5-litre V8 Aston Martin, totally unsilenced. Yeah. And it's just
yeah,
awesome.
I'd love to have, say that those is one of them things. Like those are the cars that in my head. I go, I'm never going to get in one of them, purely from the accessibility point of view. It's like whenever I see like a McLaren parked in the stable bay, I'm always hopeful that I'm going to see a blue badge. Yet to see one, but there you go.
Well, so I've been racing in a McLaren this year, and I'll tell you what, the Aston Martin was a nightmare to get in and out of because it had a roll cage and a half cage, and the aperture for the door, you'd open it up, you'd literally have to post yourself through a gap about that big, and it was not easy. Whereas the McLaren, because it's mid-engine, it's got quite low sills, so it doesn't need that bar going across, and it was actually really good to get in and out of. I mean, Aaron, who's paraplegic, he gets in and out of it fine.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear.
You'd be surprised, Charlie.
Yeah. But I'm surprised as well. Like, it's really nice to hear as well that it didn't shake you more, because I know even from injuries from a swimming context, there's been certain things that I'm like, not going to do that again. But then when it comes to crashing a car at 100 miles an hour, I don't know how you got in a car and gone, yeah, this is all right. I would have been gone for a week.
I don't know. I don't know. Like I said to you, I didn't sleep that well. But I think because I understood what had happened and I understood how to fix it. I think just that 5-minute warm-up lap that I had where I tested everything, it kind of put my mind at ease. And you haven't got time to worry about stuff like that when you're in the car, because you've got a load of lunatics like flying up your inside wanting to take you at the next corner. So, yeah, I didn't have time to think about that really.
I mean, I say it's more. I suppose it's that whole thing of it's that the longer you don't get back on the horse, the more you start thinking about it. So I suppose it is that context of you just got to do it and see what happens.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I had a road crash. Like I'd say probably 6 months before I got the job at the university. I bought a Jag. I had this beautiful V8 automatic Jag because I couldn't drive a manual anymore. And I spent all my love and attention and time getting that car looking beautiful. And then I crashed it coming back from London. And I was in floods of tears. And I'll tell you what, I was actually scared of driving on the road for a little while after that, because it was a bit traumatizing.
It's horrible, isn't it? I mean, I've never had a severe accident, but even the basics ones, like one of mine was just after I'd passed, someone crashed in, someone pulled out on me and drove off.
Oh, so that's nice.
Basically said, pull into the petrol station. So me being 18, just was like, right, pull into the petrol station, spun around, he was gone. Valuable lesson learned, but there you go. But even after that, I was funny about getting in the car. But then I've had quite a bad experience I had a tyre burst. So I was out learning with my sister, and my tyre burst, and I went into a railing, and I was still learning at the time.
That's scary, man. That's scary.
Out of nowhere. I wasn't even going fast. It wasn't even on luckily, I suppose, I wasn't on any A road or anything. I was just driving around my local town and went into a railing.
That's not fun, mate. That's not fun at all.
No, but it's nice to hear, because I say racing is one of them ones where if anything goes wrong, it's kind of like big problem. Whereas a lot of the time in more physical sports, it's very much like, oh, this is broken, but it will heal over time. Whereas if a car's broke, it's broke. You got
Yeah, yeah. Don't. That's my mum only came and watched one race of mine the whole time I've done this. She refused to watch it on the TV. My dad watched a lot of the racing, but my wife, who she found that she would like coming to the races and watch from the pits because we had a live on board, but she didn't like it when she wasn't there because you only got half the story when you were watching on the TV, so you didn't know if we were having problems with the car or what the track conditions were like, because the TV doesn't really show if it's raining a little bit and you're on the wrong tire, and that's when it got hairy, really, really hairy.
yeah.
I remember the first time I drove the BMW at Silverstone in full wet, and I was following a car going down the Hanger Straight, and I looked down at the speedo and I was doing about 130, and the traction control was kicking in as I was hitting puddles, and the rear was aquaplaning a little bit. But not only that, the car that was in front of me, I could see the red lights of it pulling away from me, and then suddenly it just vanished. And I was like, has he just flown off the track somewhere, or is it just that the visibility's that bad? And
Wow.
that was before we really started racing in the 240, and that was quite scary. That was genuinely a bit scary, but the car felt really good. You know, you have to believe in what the coaches are telling you about keeping tire temperature, and that the car will hold on. And you know, we were really lucky that we had a really amazing coach, a guy called Jamie Falvey, and I owe a lot to him and his guidance, to be honest with you.
It's, as I say, I just sit there and go, getting in a car going 130 mile an hour. I think round the track scares me more. I've never done it on the road, but even the prospect of doing it on the track just scares me more.
No, it's fine. When you're in a track, you're in a controlled environment. You know, you've got big runoff areas, and everyone is driving the same way. So everyone knows what you're doing. You've got marshals, you've got a big roll cage. You know, I've got a helmet, I've got a hands device, I've got a 4-point harness, I've got a big roll cage around me. You know, it's a much safer environment than the road, if I'm being completely honest.
By the way, I'm not encouraging doing 130, never have done, but it's that whole prospect of like, at least motorway is straight line. It's just a straight line. Whereas the idea of going around a bend, nope, not a bit of me.
I mean, the bends, you're lucky if you're doing like 90, 100. Sometimes you do a bit faster than that. I think the fastest I went in a straight line was just under 160. That was pretty exhilarating. That was in the McLaren.
Especially because it's one of, like, in cars like that, the McLaren, it would be a case of you put your foot down and it just goes. It's just gone.
Oh yeah. We did testing in Portugal in February this year in Portimao, and the straight there is the longest straight I've ever driven, and we were just about touching 161, 162 miles an hour. We're coming to the braking zone, and that was hairy. That was really hairy.
Insane. Yeah. What is your actually? That would be. What's your dream? What would be your dream car to drive?
Oh, that is a good question. Does it have to be a current car, or can it be an old car?
Whatever.
I'd say a McLaren F1.
Well, good choice.
McLaren F1. The GTR version, so the racing version with straight pipes, stripped out interior, sequential gearbox. That would be, chef's kiss.
I don't know what, but I obviously mine's more of a road context because I've never been a race driver. But yeah, I've always lent to dream cars in terms of ones I just want to have a go at. I'd want to drive a Chevy Camaro.
Good choice. Big capacity V8. Yeah, I'd like a Corvette as well. I'd love to have a go in one of those.
I've actually got there's a guy I follow online. I can't remember his name. I'll have to send it to you later. He drives he's wheelchair user, drives a Corvette, and I'm still bamboozled about the fact that he gets a wheelchair in a Corvette.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Has he got passengers to put the wheelchair in as well? I suppose they got boots, haven't they?
Well, no, but he pulls the wheelchair across him, and I know a load of people do that. But it's the idea of doing that in a Corvette. there's
It's
not
not
a
a
lot
big
of
problem.
room. No, there's
There's
not a
not
lot
a
of
lot of
room.
women. No.
So, but no, that's really interesting. But going back to sort of, you said about your surgeries. Do you know
Yeah.
how many you've actually had?
Um, on my hips or just on my body
Just
overall?
in general.
Oh god, I've got to count then. It won't be as many as you think. I know people that have had many, many more than me. My teammate James, he was born without hands. He's had way more surgeries than me. So probably like 8 or 9 procedures.
That's still a lot. I mean, people always come to me, and I'm like, I've been really lucky. I've only ever had three really, and like the most severe one was I had one in the States where they like rewired my, uh, essentially rewired my nervous system.
Wow.
Basically, yeah. It was it. I was only, God, what was I, 12 at the time, and basically with cerebral palsy, it's all to do with the spasticity in your body, and that's what holds you up. This
Yep.
surgery, SDR, gets rid of 90, between 90 and 98% of it. And basically, I was like a lump of jelly, couldn't do anything because I used to use my spasticity for everything. But yeah, I mean, nine surgery. When was your first one?
Oh, my first surgery was when I was like 6 months old, 5 months old, or something.
That's it.
Next surgery I had was when I was 8, and that was a compound fracture to be repaired. And then I had a really bad fracture when I was 12, so that was another general anaesthetic and surgery. I've had another break and another surgery for that, but those were like local anaesthetic surgeries. I've then had the derotation osteotomy for the first time. I had the surgery to have some of the metal taken out because they thought there was a screw, because it gave me a bone splinter. So there had a big splinter of bone
Ouch.
sticking out of my thigh, which was really uncomfortable. I then had the surgery done again, where they took all the metalwork out and put it all back in. Then had the surgery to fix my ACL. I then had the surgery to take all the metalwork out.
Yeah.
Then I had a surgery to fix a labral tear. So I tore the inside of my labrum of the hip. That was painful. That was a lot more painful than I was expecting. I've had an arthroscopy done on my right hip, and I've had multiple steroid injections in both hips as well. And that's kind of where I am right now, is
Yeah.
steroid injections. And that was like 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago I had that.
It's going to sound a really stupid question, forgive me if it is, but do they make a difference, the steroid injections?
It's funny because I swear for like the first 6 weeks, I definitely had increased mobility in my right hip, and it significantly reduced the pain. My left hip didn't do anything. Felt just as bad as it did before, but I'd say there was definitely a noticeable difference in my right hip. But, I'll be honest with you, like weekend before last, I was off with a bit of a cold flu, and I was laid up in bed for, I don't know, for probably 4 days. And it's the, most sedentary I've been this month. And like I went to get up, and I just had these awful stabbing pains in where the injection site was, on the left hip,
Oh,
which I've
wow.
not had before since the injections. And I was in a really bad way for a couple of days, where I couldn't really move at all. And then I suppose since the trip came back, my right hip, I've started to get the stabbing pains in my right hip as well.
Wow.
So it's part of the course, mate. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got so used to like managing my body now that I've got a lot better at it. Because I think when I was on morphine, I was overdoing stuff all the time. I was trying to do too much, and now I'm not on any drugs. I did 6 months with the pain clinic, and that helped me learn to manage my pain, but also manage my mental health a lot better, because my mental health is tied to my pain. So if I'm feeling down and I let myself get into that spiral, it kind of amplifies the pain that you feel, which then limits your mobility, which then makes you stiffer, which then makes your pain worse. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
And now I know what my limits are, and I just try to take myself up to that limit. And then it's really up to me. If I go over that limit, I know I've got to suffer the consequences of it. But yeah.
Just for anyone that doesn't know, the pain clinics, like it's like a more of a holistical approach when it comes to pain, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about mindfulness. So it's the pain loop. So with chronic pain, what ends up happening is if you have breakthrough pain, so if you break a bone, or if you stand on a thumbtack, or if you cut yourself badly, or something, you have an impact injury or something, your brain goes into survival mode. So your brain goes, body, you've just had a traumatic thing happen. We're going to send messages from your brain down to that traumatic area, and we're going to make that area hypersensitive to pain because we don't want you to hurt that anymore. And basically that's why if you smack into something and you bruise yourself, that area is a lot more sensitive than it was probably when you actually did it. You probably didn't feel it as much when you first did it. And what the pain clinic taught me was that I need to interrupt that signal somehow, because what will happen is if you're in chronic pain, your body will pick up that there's something painful there. Your brain goes, oh crap, there's something going on here. I'd better make this more sensitive to pain. And then your pain is then amplified. And then your body goes, oh, there's pain. And you end up just stuck in this constant loop of not being able to get out of pain. It sucks. It really sucks because you're just always then focused on the pain. So I was taught to make friends with the pain. I was taught to acknowledge its existence. That's the best way I can do it, is make friends with your pain and acknowledge that it's there, and try and get yourself in a mindful sort of state of mind where you're thinking about it, but you're not thinking about it. You're trying to take your mind off of other things. So you would focus on your breathing. You would focus on things that you could hear in the room. It's like distraction therapy, I suppose. You're distracting your body from what's actually happening so that you can function. And it was amazing. Like, it was absolutely amazing, because as soon as I started to think a bit more positively about my body, I came off the morphine. And then because I was off the morphine, I could feel things a lot more. So I didn't over push myself. So I didn't get myself into that situation where the pain was so bad that I couldn't not think about it.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I'll be honest, I come from a very much a family when it comes to something hurts, take medication. That is very much the Randall approach to dealing with pain. So like the holistical side, I don't know, did it take you a while to buy into it? Because I worry that would be me.
It took me a long time. I did 6 months of the therapy, and that was going, and basically do you know what it is? It's like Alcoholics Anonymous for people with chronic pain. So I'm in there with a room with 6 people, and we all went on the same journey, and we all sat in a circle, and we all talked about our experiences, and we all talked about whether it was helping or things were improving it. And I think at the time I was so at the end of my tether of where I was with things that I was kind of willing to try anything. So I was quite open-minded going in. And I think it was when the doctors explained the process, because we had a physiotherapist and we had a psychologist there, and it was the psychologist explaining the process of how your brain, processes pain and the chemicals that it puts out, that it really made perfect sense to me that actually pain is just a chemical response that your body creates through its nervous system and its brain. And ultimately we don't have a lot of control, but we do have some control over our brains. So it actually made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's So yeah, I mean, it's something that I'll probably look into, having to deal with like cramps and stuff. Obviously, not to the extent of yours. Like mine's definitely not chronic, but it's definitely something that, particularly from my upbringing, the dependency on paracetamol, ibuprofen, of like that gut react, like it's almost like a reflex. I was actually talking to a friend about it who's also got a disability. He was like, it's just a reflex. You just naturally go, that hurts, take this.
Yeah, I'm going to take some ibuprofen. I'm going to take some diclofenac. Then
Yep.
I need some omeprazole. And yeah, my stomach got ruined, got absolutely ruined through codeine, cocodamol, diclofenac, really
Yep.
hardcore anti-inflammatories, and that affected my brain as well, because it really does mess up your head. So yeah, coming off all the medication was such a game changer for me. I still take paracetamol every now and then.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, for me, from the cerebral palsy perspective, like our pain is very much manageable through that stuff. So I say that I'm not I'm not a pill popper by any stretch of the imagination. It's just interesting as well that our society almost like builds you just to, that's just what you go to. If something hurts, you take a pill. But then interestingly, like one, because I had another guest who was also has chronic pain. One thing I'm interested in is, have you ever thought about like CBD? Because it's something that I've had now for about a year, and it was one thing that massively helped with any spasms, cramps, any of that. But then the byproduct of that also was it helped me with my anxiety. It helped in so many different ways. Is it something that you've considered?
I've got CBD spray. So the one that you put under your tongue.
Yeah,
It's very good. It's very good. It helps me sleep. I sleep really well if I ever do that.
yeah.
But again, I'm trying not to be dependent on things. But that's just me personally, and I'm not saying
Nah,
that
that's
other
fair.
people. There's nothing wrong with using stuff like that. But I try to use it sparingly. But yeah, I totally agree with you. CBD spray, brilliant stuff. Absolutely
I think the
brilliant.
reason why I keep bringing it up is because there's this like misconception that's still around, even though it's been around a while, of like, oh, you're just gonna get high all the time, and I'm like, no, that's not what CBD's for.
Not understanding what the process is going on there.
Yeah. So whenever I have someone on, I'm like, can you just reconfirm that it's not a recreational thing. It actually has massive benefits, like you said, with sleep. Like I've never been a great sleeper.
No,
It
me
helps
neither.
hugely with my sleep. Like my brain's very overactive. I'm that person that will be laying there at 11 o'clock and I suddenly have a business idea and I'm like, okay, that's me up for the next 12 hours, and it's so frustrating. But yeah, it's interesting that that's still a way that society views that because it's so new.
We're still very backwards in many ways. Still very backwards.
One thing
Yeah, I struggle with sleep as well, big time.
it's horrible. Another thing I wanted to get your view on, and I did mean to touch on it earlier when we were talking about the surgeries that we'd had. What's your view when it comes to the idea of sharing more about surgeries when it comes to surgeries on young people? Now, both of us have been operated on at early stages. I think, from my perspective, it's very much a case of they were almost trying to give me a better quality of life. Whereas from what I understand from your side of things, it's more of there's been a physical issue they've gone in and fixed. Whereas mine was very much, it's like, if we do this tweak, it might make him better, but we're not 100% sure. But in terms of like communicating that with young people, what's your view on that?
Ooh, I mean, I had all the risks explained to me before I had my surgery when I was in my 20s, and I think I was quite cavalier about just signing the piece of paper, and not. I don't think I really truly appreciated the possibility that the surgery had gone wrong, because I'd actually generally had a really good standard of care when I was growing up with all of the hospital visit I had, that
Mm.
I just thought, oh, it's another surgery. I'll have a general anesthetic and I'll feel a bit groggy when I wake up and I'll probably be sore for a few months and then I'll be back to normal. And it never really crossed my mind that things might go wrong. I think I'm a lot older and a bit wiser now, and I'm a lot more attune, I think, to the fact that human bodies are not like cars. You can't just swap a part in, because everybody's different. A chassis from a factory are generally all the same. So you could just swap out a suspension upright and put in a new clutch, etc., etc. And no two bodies are exactly the same. So there's no real, in my eyes, guarantee of 100% success, even though medical procedures have got much better. But I think as a youngster, if I'd been put into the situation, I mean, I do remember being a youngster and being put in the situation because I have memories of being an 8-year-old, basically not wanting to go to hospital anymore because I had lots and lots of tests and things done on me. And mum and dad at home have got a teeny tiny little ball and socket hip replacement that I think that they talked about doing when I was a kid. And I'm pretty sure we made the right decision by not doing it. I mean, even though I think growing up, would I have lived my life differently? Would I have not done all of the things I did that led me to have lots of broken bones? I might well have done, yeah. I might be a different person than I am today. Yeah. So I think my parents did the absolute right thing for me. They let me get on with things, and adult me just has to suffer the consequences, I guess.
But
I've done so much more with my life since I went through all of that. I did some stuff when I was growing up, I suppose, and had a good career with photography. But now I've since all of this has happened, I've done and achieved more in my life than I ever thought remotely possible.
It's really interesting because when I've spoken about this before, my parents didn't I kind of knew what was going on, not so much on the earlier occasions, but then also like any kid, if you said to any kid, do you want to go through this pain? They don't see the rationale behind it. They just go, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. So there's a certain, I understand the premise of informing kids a little bit more, and particularly the psychology behind it of not, so then they're less likely to associate hospitals with trauma or pain. But there's only so much you can tell a 6-year-old because they're naturally going to be like, no, I don't want to. If you go into the detail and be like, so they're going to cut open this body part, no one's going to want that.
Yeah, you're going to cut this off and then you're going to put this in here and what? I'm going to be in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
For what? What am I going to benefit for?
It's like that. I get it, but yeah, it's a weird one. I always come back to the strange moments that happen with surgery. One thing that I remember from my surgery in the States is the last thing I heard as they were putting me under the general anaesthetic was count back, and the last thing I heard was beep, and I thought my heart had stopped, and that was the last thing I'd heard, and I was like, wait, what? Wait, hold on, and then woke up and was like, oh, thank God, I'm still here.
I've managed to stay out of a general anaesthetic for a few years now, and I'd quite like to stay out of having a general anaesthetic for a few more years, to be honest with you. I am going to need surgery again at some point, but it's been nice not to have to go through that for a while. It really has. One of the times I had the surgeries, I had to have a spinal epidural. So I'm paralysed from the knee down, and I had to be catheterized. I got a urinary tract infection.
It's the
catheterization was this big guy came and did it, and I was like, I'm not going to watch this. You just go right ahead and do it. And
it's the one. It's the one thing you can say to anyone, any male, and say, "Right, have you been through this?" And then they go, "No," and you're like, "Right, you haven't experienced pain."
Yeah, it was horrible, man. It was absolutely horrible.
It's whenever someone mentions catheter, I'm like, no, it's too much trauma. Too much trauma.
No thanks.
And then I get friends with other conditions. They're like, oh, but I've had it plenty of times, and I'm like, yep, still no thank you. Still no thank you.
No. Sorry, brought up a subject that we shouldn't talk about.
But yeah, it's interesting. The whole idea of bringing kids in on stuff like that, it makes sense, but I just don't think it's it depends how it's done, because it
Mm.
almost paints the picture of like parents are being evil, and I'm like, no, they're just making the best decisions they can with the
Yeah,
information
they're
they've
trying to make
got.
good decisions for their kids. They're trying to make good decisions for them, for their kids, so that when they're older, they're not going to suffer the consequences, I suppose, if they're not making decisions. But yeah, I see what you mean about it as a topic, because I think when you are a youngster, if you, especially if you're kind of under 10 years old, I don't think you truly understand
No.
why things are happening so much. I think if you're a teenager, yeah, you're probably starting to get a bit more of a grasp of it. But unless you're a very mature 10, under 10-year-old, I don't think you really understand it.
No, and that's not to say as well, there is an element of anyone with a disability, you do tend to mature quicker, but there's only so much you can wrap your head around. Like, I remember my first surgery, I got a cancellation, and I'd literally come back from a family holiday and got driven straight to the hospital. And that was a very strange experience. I went from here to bottom very quickly. Do you think now you'd be as open? Obviously, it depends on you have to, but I think the conversation as well is that argument between, do I need the surgery? Do I have to have it, or should I have it? If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I mean, I need surgery at the moment, but I'm putting it off for as long as I possibly can, because I've got some stability back in my life now that I've not had for a long time, and I'm able to manage my symptoms pretty well with use of wheelchair, and it's a really nice place to be at the moment.
Yeah.
The pain is annoying, the sleeping sometimes a real issue for me, and that's affecting me a lot, because obviously if you're tired all the time, that affects you for everything.
Yeah.
'Cause when you're tired, you're in more pain, and ugh. Um, I can push it for as long as I can. The surgeons have basically said, get in touch, when you can't bear it anymore, basically, and then I'll go for the big one. And then if I do that, that'll be total hip replacement on both sides, rebuilding my pelvis on the left, making
Whoa. Okay.
my left femur 2 inches longer, and they've said it's
That.
anywhere between 6 months to a year recovery. So
Oh
that's,
God.
but
Yeah.
there's a chance that it could cure me, but there's also a chance that it might not. There's a chance that it could not work, and then I'm back to square one, -1.
Yeah. It's also the impact on your family and everything else as well. I must admit, chronic pain was a tricky one whenever I speak to friends and people on the podcast, of like how it's impacted their family scenarios, because it's almost so hard for people who are not in the space to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I think because I moved home 15 years ago. I think it impacted my parents more than I think it impacted me. I think they really struggled with it. They really did. I know they did, because I think they felt helpless to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
And I think there was elements of frustration that I wasn't, magically better.
Especially going through the same surgeries and it not working. That must have been very
Yeah,
challenging.
that was frustrating. That
Yeah.
was. I got to know all the nurses in the PACU ward really, really well, and I got to know all the people in the ward really well. And I was, every time I went into theatre, I'd come out and I'd be in the recovery wings, and everyone would be like 40 years, 50 years older than me, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're so young! You're so
Yeah.
young for being in here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I've heard that before."
Yeah. Don't mind me. I'm just getting my hip replaced. Just to finish, I'm going to hit you with the last question, just because I'm conscious on time. What's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
So one thing that's politically correct that I do agree with is queuing. I'm a British person, and I queue. Okay, you get me on the road, and I can see that there's a bit of a jam going up ahead. I will get into that queue, and I'll be nice and patient, because what's the sense in pushing ahead and making the queue last for longer? So, yeah, for me, it's queuing.
I have to say, this is gonna right. So this doesn't travel well, and I realise this. So my other half is from the Midlands, and we were talking about this topic of like queuing and queue jumping, and I basically said, oh, like my dad's a bit of a white van man. Now, in the southeast context, that essentially means he's a builder and he queue jumps all the time. However, in the Midlands context and up north, from what I can understand, it basically means that it's more of like a, let's say, it's a much worse problem and it's a bit more involving children. And I was mortified by it, by going, no,
Oh, right.
yes. And I was mortified. I was like, no, I basically just mean that he tries to get in the queue and it's a nightmare and you all have to pretend you're asleep because you're really embarrassed.
Oh, no. No,
It was horrible. Like, my girlfriend's going, you can't say that. And I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant at all.
So I'm from London, so I knew exactly what you meant when you said that.
It's I was literally, I couldn't believe it. I was like, no, that's not. Oh, at least you got what I meant.
Yeah, I knew what you meant.
My dad's a nightmare. Like literally every time, I'm like, stop it, and he's like, nah,
yeah.
it's fine.
Bear in mind, younger me used to be the queue jumper. I used to be like, oh, everyone's just bloody sheep. Let's just get to the front of this queue. And then I think as I've matured and got older, I've realised that the road is a really good metaphor for life. You know, we're all trying to get somewhere from A to B. And if we all climb over each other and try and beat each other, all that's going to happen is we're all going to just grind to a halt, which is what happens. So
Yeah.
if we all just take our time and give each other space, we all get down the road in good time. So yeah, that's just older me becoming a bit
very
older.
True. I always try to remember what my dad got told on a speed awareness course, which is basically that, like, I think it's something like if you traveling 30 mile an hour faster, you're actually only going to get there like 30 seconds quicker.
It's totally true. I see it every day I go to work. I have the same 3 mile drive to work, and it's this single road that goes all the way down. It's a bit of a dual carriageway, and I'll watch cars come flying past me, and we'll get to the traffic lights, and I would have just taken my time, and I'll get down there, and I'll just look to the side of them and be like, well, that served you well, didn't it? And then, and then they'll cut through some traffic, and of course they'll get into the wrong lane, they'll get stuck behind someone, and I'll just like cruise past and be like, is it still working yet? So yeah, I mean I think that's just from commuting to work a lot that's taught me that.
Oh, it's many, like, particularly with me, I get it from driving up to Birmingham all the time to see my other half's family. You just sit there and think, I hate spending time on the M25 because everyone drives like an idiot.
They do. My tip on the motorways is just stick on the inside lane and just know truly that you are not going to do 70 ever. If you just sit there and go, if I don't try to do 70 and I try and stick at like 60, that's as fast as the lorries can go. And generally everyone gets into like the overtaking lane and the lane after that. And you just end up with loads of space. It's lovely.
I one thing that really frustrates me is when the inside lane's just empty and I'm like, what are you not doing? Just move over. But
it's just
there we
British
go.
For you, man.
British thing of like, no, we'll be fine. No, we're just no patience. We got no patience. I'm just as guilty. If I'm in an impatient mood, I'm a nightmare.
Well, I think I accept if someone's in a rush. Like if someone's got to get somewhere quickly, they're probably going to need to use that. I did a speed awareness course. I just make sure I leave with enough time so that I never need to rush. And I get to where I'm going now a lot more relaxed than if I'm kind of in the outside lane looking for a space to come out and pull out, always looking in my mirrors. I get to where I'm going and I'm exhausted, whereas I just chill now, and that'd be my advice.
That's fair enough. Like, to be fair, I think mine does. Like, I'm always early. My friends always have to make out of me. I'm always early, but then it's because things take me ages. Like, I got to put my wheelchair in the car. It's a whole thing. So, like, I say most of the time I'm pretty good, but yeah, there is the odd occasion. Like, come on! Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? If you want to find me, you can go onto my Instagram, which is CJO_racing. If you go to Team Brit's website, you can also learn a bit about me on there. I think Dan Maskell Trust did a little case study on me for for a bit of wheelchair tennis on there as well. That's me, basically.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.